Hello, and welcome to Lunchtime Live. I'm Leslie.
I'm Ed.
Hi, everybody, and good afternoon, or wherever you are. We are so glad you're here and joining us. Welcome. Say hi in the chats, if you will. And so today we have a few different fun things to talk about with you today. One of them being that we did something a little fun and different last week, which is we did, instead of your normal Sunday message, we did it as a dialogue.
Yeah.
Which is different than a podcast.
So
that was a different experience for me. So that was fun. Oh, the graphics struggling. That's sweet. Okay. It's been that kind of a day, guys. We've done like 2 podcasts already this morning.
Slow Monday.
It's just like, we're Ed and Leslie. So that was a fun and different things. And you are ready with a quote, it looks like.
I've got a couple of quotes.
Hit us with them.
How's this?
Start us off strong.
Yeah. So we've been talking about goals a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes goals that word makes me think of the word purpose. And this is from Henry Moore, who is a wonderful sculptor. He said, the secret of life is to have a task, something you devote your entire life to, something you bring everything to, every minute of the day for the rest of your life. And the most important thing is, it must be something you cannot possibly do. How's that make you feel, Leslie?
That makes me feel extremely tired.
Then you're going to love this one. I got point and counterpoint, okay?
I'm ready.
So breathe. All right, this one is going to bring you up.
Okay,
all right?
I'm ready.
John Cage, composer.
Oh, yeah.
Leslie filling me in on some details about John Cage.
Yes.
The highest purpose is to have no purpose at all.
Okay, that feels much better now, yes.
This puts one in accord with nature in her manner of operation. Here endeth the lesson.
John Cage coming through. Thanks, John Cage. I needed that today.
Can't you embrace that one? I mean, that is really...
Yeah. It's a technical difficulty kind of day. We're going to keep with it. Fingers crossed. If you guys have trouble watching live because of any internet issues, the replay should work.
Remember, the highest purpose is to have
no purpose at all. So we're gonna fingers crossed. We're learning here together, gang.
Yeah.
We're so grateful to all of you who are here live or watching the replay, which is fun too. Coming in with a fun fact about John Cage.
Yeah.
So, John Cage, as you might know, his most famous work. He is a legitimate composer, but which is to say. But 433 is a legitimate piece of music.
Okay.
Depending on how you look at it.
All right.
So I had in college, a new music class. And I'm surprised this isn't sort of more widely accepted. I think 433 has become a little bit of a punchline.
Okay.
These are my explaining hands I have going on here right now.
33 so far.
Right. So 433 is a multi-movement work.
Yeah.
Of which the music is entirely, if you see it written out, is just rests. So there isn't a note to play.
Wow.
And if it is for piano, so the performer walks out on stage, sits down at the piano, opens the lid, waits a certain amount of time, and then closes it, and then opens it for the next movement.
I volunteer to play it for the congregation this Sunday.
Honestly, you'd be great at it. But the reason I say you'll be great at it is because, so the whole point of it actually is to experience what sitting and listening for 4 minutes and 33 seconds really feels like.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And that actually,
4:33.
they say, well, it's 4 minutes, 33 of silence, but is it silent?
Right.
Right? Like if we did it now, we would hear people over there. We'd hear the fan of the computer. If you do it outside, you hear birds and wind.
Our bodies create sound.
Our body creates sound, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. We're drums with our heartbeats.
Yes.
Hum. Our breath. That there is so much to be heard and experienced in a live performance of 433. I don't recommend you put it on a CD or anything. I think it works better in a live situation.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's intriguing, isn't it?
Not such a punchline anymore, huh? Now it's a whole thought experiment. It's extremely.
It's cooking away.
Yeah.
I like it. And I don't know what it was that made me think about John Cage this morning, this idea that the highest purpose is to have no purpose at all. But here's a man who was clearly playing with the edges, right?
Yeah.
Wow, I love that.
It's very good. Well, I like this idea of purpose is no purpose because I think that's something we have been talking about pretty regularly over the past couple weeks, as we talked about making and what is the purpose of art. You know, does being purposeless make it art? Right? Is art with a purpose art?
Right. I was taking a class at Silvermine Art School. Little shout out to Silvermine.
Rub it in. My art class got canceled, guys, and I'm a little touchy about it.
I didn't want to. I didn't. It's a raw wound.
I really wanted to do silversmithing on the weekend, and
It's
it got
gonna
canceled.
come. It's gonna happen. You gotta believe.
Oh, it's the light at the end of the tunnel's now in December versus last weekend.
Oh, I know. That would have been much better, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
Well,
you were taking
over
a class at Silvermine. Sorry.
Shout out to all those good folks at Silvermine.
Absolutely.
They're doing their best.
They're trying. It's hard.
And there was I was sort of positioned each week next to a woman who was someone who really wanted to paint realistic, landscapes and portraits. And, I always started by like taking a big hunk of pastel and just
I love it.
Just throwing it up there and then
like
see
it.
what happened, what goes next to that. And we started talking back and forth about this process. And she talked about how frightening it was for her to think about taking a page and just putting a mark on it and then seeing what would happen next. And I thought it was a marvelous discussion and it went on for weeks. And that entire time we were together, she always talked about doing it, but never did.
Really?
Yeah. So there is something. So I can now see where, John Cage was pushing something, right? It's about that seconds of something.
Right.
But creating the space for there not to be a goal, not to be a purpose is a lovely thing. Because I think his insight, John Cage's insight, was that's how creatures relate to their environment. They're doing things they need to do. But maybe there's just a whole different aspect to it that we can't get.
Yeah, I feel like he was very much a person who created without fear and took really interesting inspiration from different places. Like I think he composed once using a chess game position, and he interpreted the different pieces and the different spaces and squares as rhythms and notes, and then turn that into a piece of music.
Creative.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff.
I love that. Glad you shared that.
There's a great Cunningham is his last name. I can't remember his
is it
name.
Merce Cunningham?
Merce Cunningham. Thank you. That was his partner.
Oh, really? The great dancer.
The great dancer, the great choreographer. Gosh. So talk about a power couple, those two.
Wow.
We're just creating. There was in the same class, we watched a documentary about them, and it's really fabulous. Wow. Really, really fabulous stuff. So finding that inspiration. So speaking of inspiration, conversation.
About the woman with the alabaster
jar.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, this story, this such a wonderful story about this encounter that Jesus has with this woman who has an alabaster jar of precious ointment. She comes uninvited to a dinner gathering and basically pours it on his head and rubs it into his body somehow. And disciples get really upset about it. Don't behave very sweetly to anyone.
Yeah.
And he has to, bring the whole thing down. But he then elevates this action to something of global significance, he said, right? Wherever this story is told, it'll be told in remembrance of her. So what was it that inspired that? Thinking about compassion, some unusual angles of compassion. We think about compassion as mercy and kindness and tenderness, forgiveness. That's all true. But here's a woman who does something, it's unexpected, it's not planned. And maybe she does it on the whim of a moment, right? Is she really ready to part with it? Right. So she has that in it. So compassion lets something go that was really precious in order to do something good for someone else. The other thing about it is that Jesus basically says she did this for my burial. And so this is an act of compassion. You could say it's not going to go very far. Right? His death is coming up on the horizon. We probably like to think about compassion as something that we invest in the world and maybe we'll get a little return on it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Not going to really happen in that case. So all those things said something to me about compassion that seemed to inspired it.
So it was doing something unexpected and kind of playing with expectations in that way.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing.
And doing it also in a way that was unpopular. How's that?
And not take that personally.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine. Well, and I think I have a note. So this is a funny thing when we have a conversation a week ago and I write something down. What did I mean when I wrote preaching as a commodity?
Oh, interesting.
What does that spur for you? Because I don't know what it means.
Believe it or not, I think I do remember that.
Thank goodness somebody does.
Yeah, we're back. We're back to that discussion. We were talking about the way in which the church, we've created an experience of worship in our churches, right? That tends to be certain time. It has a certain flow to it and so on. And there's a sermon that happens in that space. And we were contrasting it with the way that Jesus tended to deliver his messages, which were kind of like on the go.
Yeah.
Right? Wherever you happen to be. And story form. I mean, what's the longest story that Jesus ever told? It's probably, 3.5 or 4 minutes.
They're travel size.
Travels. Perfect.
That's all I got. I'm out.
Wow. Your Monday just got a lot better, didn't it?
I feel better now.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks so much.
So the thing about these messages, these travel-sized messages, I'm not going to be able to forget that now, is that he's constantly like throwing them like seed out into the lives of his listeners. Right? Wherever he goes. He just throws out this, doesn't feel like, it's not like a nicely planned sermon series. Right? We're going to do this for 3 months.
It's not like packaged.
It's not packaged. And we have created a process where the sermon tends to be a certain length of time, and it's really geared for the congregation. And as we often say, we hope the congregation will like it or resonate with it or connect with it. And in that sense, we're really dancing close to this line where the sermon becomes more of a commodity. And when you hear preachers talk amongst themselves and say, well, I wasn't sure that I could deliver that message because I was afraid of alienating my congregation or upsetting my congregation, then it really does start to feel like a commodity that we've packaged and are presenting. I've been very fortunate in my life, certainly includes my current situation, to be in congregations where people really appreciate a lot of freedom from the pulpit, right? Covering a lot of ground. But I just think that this is a challenge that pastors have, and that phrase, that we want to be careful about creating services and experiences that feel like commodities. That's not where we're headed with this.
Well, and from what I've gleaned over the years, it seems like the messages that Jesus was delivering were the opposite of people pleasing.
Yep.
It seemed like he was basically like, you think, that thing you just did, here's why that was not right.
You got it. I think the ultimate example of this, right? The first sermon, according to one of the Gospels, one of the portraits we have, town synagogue in Nazareth. Well, how sweet is that? He's going to go back. All the old friends, neighbors, family members, right? It's beautiful. He finally stands up. He chooses a beautiful passage from the book of the prophet Isaiah.
Yeah.
He reads that. Then he gives a little, interpretation spin to it, which is not pleasant. And basically, they decide to kill him.
Tough crowd.
This is not the way preachers usually dream of effect. Hillside, they're so angry with him.
Yeah.
And, to think about having that kind of freedom when you're preaching. I had a friend of mine who said he loves to ask. He does not preach on a weekly basis, so he gets away with saying this.
Got it.
He likes to ask all of his preacher friends, what is the one sermon you want to preach but won't dare to?
I'm really resisting asking you that question.
Don't you ask me that right now. It's Monday.
It's Monday. It's too early in the week. But that's such an interesting idea too. And like what message would each of us deliver if we didn't have the fear?
If it, absolutely did not matter.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's true for every art form, true for music, right?
Absolutely.
There might be a form of music, now that we talked about that we're thinking, boy, this could really alienate people, really rub them the wrong way.
Yeah.
But do we have the freedom to do that? Or will we exercise the freedom whether or not it's a gift to us?
Yeah. I'm really tempted now to schedule 4:33 on Sunday.
As long as I'm doing it, I think go right
you
ahead.
Want to perform it? You got it.
It's been my dream.
It'll be your best
little
piano performance yet. Isn't the piano on the up on the platform this week too?
Oh, I think it is. It's front and center.
I'll just walk up for the prelude. And you sit there like very formally. It's just like a.
So you're not going to be able to get it out of your head. That's the thing. It's going to keep at you.
So Shannon just recorded a podcast with me, which was amazing. And I'm so excited to share it with you all. It'll be out next week. Oh, speaking of next week, there will not be a Lunchtime Live. It is a holiday here in the U.S. I'm assuming our audience is international, by the way, in that sentence. So thank you for that. So you guys will not see you next week, the 11th. We'll be back on the 18th. Do I have those dates right?
I think that's right.
We're gonna assume I do.
Yeah.
My friend Shannon coming through with the cheekiness. She says, "I'll ask it.
Oh, okay.
What would it be, Ed?"
Nice. You know, I have to say, I think I have about a dozen of these.
Really?
Yeah.
I can believe that.
And I'll share with you a story and with our friends out there that I think it was about the first year that I was in Round Hill Community Church. One of our members came to me and he said, someday I'd like you to do a series on the most controversial social issues of the day.
Wow.
Yeah. And take that out for about 2 to 3 months, just one issue after another. The death penalty. I mean, you can just imagine.
Oh, there's so much, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say right now, if my friend was asking me this question, I think because of the events related to the racial tensions in our country within the last couple of years, and George Floyd and all of the horrible things that we've witnessed. Initially I would have thought the one message that I wanted to be most on point about was the way in which the gospel addresses reconciliation and racial justice and justice for people who are, as Howard Thurman used to put it, disinherited.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing that really felt like it was calling to me then. And I really didn't know how people in the community would respond to that, because it's not an issue that I would say that I hear very much about, so I have to feel like I have to prompt that.
Sure.
But that would have been racial resilience would have been the theme that I would have addressed. And actually, thank God, because of the messages that you've enabled us to create through our weekly e-blast, through your technological skills, I was able to share thoughts about that, which otherwise would have been almost impossible during the pandemic, unless you sent out a written statement, which I don't think necessarily always has the same power.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel that. But the one message that's on my mind every single Sunday now, every single day, is climate change.
Yes.
Right?
For sure.
And I do feel there was a time not so long ago when preaching about climate crisis in our churches was like, really?
Yeah.
There was still that kind of weight of denial was there. And I think that's lifting. But I think to speak prophetically now is to really speak about that message. And my friend Jim Ontal, whom we've had as a podcast guest, Reverend Jim Ontal, preaching about this every fourth Sunday.
Yeah.
Just makes no bones about it.
Once a month.
So I think that to me would be almost the greater challenge is to do that, is to figure out the frequency of that, you know, and for people to say, this is really heavy stuff. And how do we communicate that in a way that doesn't feel like there's no hope, right? So that's the delicate balance there. But I really appreciate Shannon's questions.
Well, that feels so much part of, we've had so many tie-ins, because we've recently had a podcast about being in the world, and literally caring for the world as being of the world. And that, being a church all 7 days and requires, there's something so beautiful and important and critical about caring for our world as people of faith. I saw a headline recently that was saying, if you're under the age of 40, get used to the term unprecedented weather situations.
Yeah, Susan, my wife, saw that and mentioned that to me as well.
I was like, well, good.
How are we doing with that? Yeah.
That's a tough pill.
Isn't that a daunting?
Brings up a lot of feelings and fear and want to make action.
We were talking about how the world is often couched in negative terms.
Right.
Right after we did that, it must have been like within hours.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend and she said, the world is so messed up.
Oh.
And I said, thank you for that opportunity to just engage you with that, right? A little bit.
Let's talk about that.
Because I still, the thing is, the world is beautiful and complex and chaotic and dangerous, right? I mean, in its natural form and beauty.
Yeah.
But how we receive it still as this complicated gift, that seems to me to be such a challenge that we're facing right now.
Absolutely.
Don't want to lose this sense of the world as gift,
Yes.
right? Some kind of deep down goodness there that comes along with being part of a creation.
Well, I'm excited to explore that with you more over the
Yeah.
coming months and years. I also I would be remiss without kind of our wonderful friend Tanya and I had, where we were talking about different faith traditions and the many things that her faith tradition and our community here for the future. Because
That's
I'm really
nice.
looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really interesting. I have a feeling I'm going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for
It's a
that.
rich question.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. So thank you all so much for joining us for Lunchtime Live. Again, we will not be here next Monday. We hope you will all take a nice Monday rest. And we'll be back here with you on the 18th.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, everybody. Have such a great rest of your day
Thanks,
and
everyone.
rest of your week.